welcome to another episode of Get Connected AR. It's the podcast that's really all about nonprofits and community organizations, churches, and all the other sorts that's taking place right here in Arkansas that you need to know about. I'm your host, Anthony Hampton, the director of City Connections, and so we've been enjoying this series. Hopefully, you're enjoying it just as well. And I'm proud to introduce to you today Dr. Patrice Bax.
Good morning.
Morning.
I appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being a part of this. Of course, we've been blessed to partner with you all in doing this, and so thank you all again for partnering with us in that way. Let's talk a little bit about Brandon House. I know there's some transition stuff that we'll kind of talk about later on, but let's talk about Brandon House. What's the vision? What was the purpose, history, and all of that stuff behind it?
So 11 years ago, it's a family organization, nonprofit organization. It was started by my mom, who serves as the executive director, my dad, who's director of finance, myself at the time when we started, I was over programming, and my brother, Dion Bax, was over production. We have the mission to transform lives through creative and performing arts. Our main goal was to do three things. The first is provide creative education programs for youth ages 6 through 18, after school, summer, and weekend programming. And then also work with creatives that are looking for support, resources to do workforce development or career development. And then provide a space for residents in Arkansas to be involved and engaged with community-based programming, performing arts events, and cultural experiences.
Okay, so three kind of different targets: the residents overall, those youth and young people that may or may not have opportunity because of limited funding, societal issues, all those very different things, and then of course the creatives is already kind of in and around our city and community that just really need that opportunity.
Yes, right. That's right.
To kind of have that exposure, things of that nature.
Yes, and over the course of time, I think things graduated into those three things. The vision was always there for those things to happen at every stage. But when we started our humble beginnings on 12th Street, right across from the Willie Hinton Center. It was a small house that's kind of set on the hill, where it was only a two program room space. And so we started with just after school programming. Well, actually we started with summer programming, but the grant allowed us through the City of Little Rock community-based programming. We started with a grant that allowed us to do summer all day, and then it ran into after school. And then we were grateful to receive a grant from UAPB Minority Initiative Sub-Recipient Grant Office, which we affectionately call Miss Argo because the name is so long, to do a tobacco prevention program called Arts Over Tobacco. And so that gave us a chance to work with older youth over the weekends. And we found that actually worked very well because a lot of middle school, high school students are involved in other after school programs or extracurricular activities. They're in sports, and so they're not engaging with community programs after school as much as the elementary. And so meeting with them over the weekends allowed us to meet them in a time where they're not consumed with school or homework or that kind of thing. We were in more social settings, more organic conversational settings. So we were able to learn a little bit more about what they're going through, what they need, and really gave them activities to embrace themselves, their gifts. And so a lot of great work was done over the weekend. And then COVID hit.
Right.
So we were faced with the reality that we weren't seeing students in our space. And at the time, that's all we were doing, were the programming aspect of Brandon House. And so one day I was on Facebook and was scrolling and found someone that was going live. It was one of the artists in the communities going live, and they were saying they were needing somewhere to go live. And so, I'm looking around our empty building, and I said, this is a nice space, that I would love to offer up, And so at the time, closer to Giving Tuesday was coming up in the May month. And so, and really, so COVID hit us in March of 2020. So we had stopped seeing students March and April. And so during that time in May, Giving Tuesday was coming up. And so I do graphic design on the side. And so I created 40 flyers to highlight just musicians, artists in the city, and came up with a campaign that says, "We rock with you. Brandon House rocks with you." And so from there, it raised enough money to buy cameras, buy backdrops, different things that we needed to turn the space into a studio. And then we started our first season of a production called Go Live, where we provide a platform for artists and musicians who have original music to do a 12 to 15 minute live performance, to meet with to do a interview with the host. And then with my graphic design skills, I would put together a press kit. So they have everything that they would need to help promote themselves. So that's what birthed our second pillar, which was the creative workforce and career development for artists. And so after COVID, and once we started doing production, the need for a bigger space, came about. And so we went through looking at 28 different locations.
Wow.
After the 13th, I was like, listen, call me when y'all find it. Because it was a great deal of stress just trying to find the right space. But then we landed on a place in Colonel Glenn, which we served there for 3 years. And it gave us a chance to branch out into our third pillar, which was the cultural and performing arts events and experiences. Right. And so it was always the vision to do all three, but it was over the course of time and some natural things that was beyond our control that happened, that took us to different levels of Brandon House.
So you talked about an area that I'm familiar with because I'm native Little Rock, 12th Street. Why that particular area for y'all initially?
Well, at the time, that's where a great need, existed for more intentional and positive programming for youth. And we had a love for that community. We partnered with BCD, which is still, in that Midtown area. And that's who provided us the chance to be in that space. My mom is a grant writer by trade. And so she served with Miss Bell, who's director of BCD. Excuse me. And so just having that relationship allowed us to serve in that community. And then when it had a chance to be in that space, that's where we lived. And even when we moved to Colonel Glenn, we kept that location for a while because we didn't want to leave, that community and those families that we were serving for that time. And a lot of people don't know the actual history of why we chose the name Brandon House.
Yeah, talk about that.
So Brandon House was a furniture company in Little Rock on 12th and University. It was a family-ran business, and it had been in the community for a very long time. So my family is from Chicago. My parents moved here in 2006. And then I moved in 2008, and then my brother moved in 2009. So we're all here now. But we used to pass by that Brandon House building, and it had been vacant for like 7 years prior to us, getting in there or looking at it. And we would pass by, and me and my dad would just dream about what could happen in that space. And on my birthday in 2009, I think it was, we had access to the space. We had reached out to the owner or the realtor at the time, and we gained access into the space. And all of the structure was still there. Because it was a furniture company, there were different spaces in Brandon House that you could vision. If you have the eye, you can envision different things happening in the space. And so we always said that we wanted to acquire the building, to have a theater, an artistic cafe, a banquet hall, a studio. So we just dreamed about what could happen. And then eventually, when we reached out to the Brandon family to see if we can get their blessing to keep the name of the building because it has so much history in our community, and, just move forward with the performing arts aspect of it, which they gave us the blessing. We moved forward all the way up until they had to we had started the nonprofit status already. So when we got into the building, they realized when they did the appraisal they realized an inspection, it was too much asbestos in the building. And so the owner thought it was more profitable to tear it down and split it into different lots, which is where we have, the CVS and the
Right.
Dairy Queen over there now. But by that time, we had already started moving and grooving with the nonprofit. And so one of the reasons why we stayed in that community is because Brandon House was
Right.
up the street.
Right.
So that was our initial, relationship was we wanted to be at Brandon House. And so 12th Street, wasn't too far from that. And so we stayed in that community.
I mean, I've always loved the work from afar that y'all do because of the community that you end up kind of reaching. We don't get that exposure. We don't
Yeah.
get the same exposure and opportunities to kind of be involved and engaged in some of those various different things. When you talk about audio, visuals, and all of those different things, I learned audio through church. That's where I had to get my feel for those things. Or if you're talking about acting or any of those things, typically for us that comes by way of church, and then you may get a great opportunity. But now you're able to kind of connect young people and others to one another to say, hey, there's so much more you can do.
Yeah, for sure. I worked on my doctorate at University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, but I studied the career development steps of how African American male musicians get from one point to another in their career. But my access to those musicians was through the churches.
Yeah.
Connecting with musicians who have, the opportunity to not only earn income but serve, but that starts especially in the Black community at church.
Yeah.
I too, build a lot of my skills in production through serving in our production ministry, at the church that I attend. And so the church has really been, I think, a huge development aspect in our
Right.
culture, in our Black community.
And I think it continues to be that, and it needs to be that. So yes, continue to utilize the church in that way, but yet now you have some creative spaces outside of there to be able to do it. And that's why we're able to do this podcast, because y'all had a space. We didn't have to try to figure all of this out. Y'all already have the means to be able to do that, and so it just made sense.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I will say this: one of so I mentioned our UAPB Miss Argo grant that funds our Arts Over Tobacco program. That grant was extremely important and relative to how we were able to serve youth in our production area at that time. So they allow us to use funds, and this is very unique from other grant funding sources. They allow us to use our funds on advertising and production dollars, contractors like musicians and performers. And because of that, our youth have been able to, see their faces on billboards, hear their voices on the radio, create music videos around a positive message. And that is extremely important. So I just wanted to give a shout out, to Ms. Argo for allowing us to do that within the grant. And it made a huge difference to how our youth see themselves,
Right.
Especially in our community. Most of the time when you're turning on the news, we're hearing about violence and, how youth are unproductive after school and on the weekends and that kind of thing. So within our programming, and that's why it was so great to meet with them over the weekends, in our programming, they were able to develop their own activities, strengthen their voices, in positive things, and see themselves, share videos of things that they worked on. They were coming up with these messages, developing lyrics to music, and seeing themselves choreographing their own step performances and different things, So it was very gratifying for me to have a space for them to do that.
Yeah.
But more importantly, being funded by an organization that understood how important it was to provide funds for kids to see themselves in a positive light.
Wow. And so I didn't know 2006 was when transition kind of started for you all coming here to Arkansas, because you all, to me anyway, in the circles that I hang out in or spend time in more than not, the Bax family has a positive name. In such the way of what you all have done and what you all are kind of continuously doing. And so to know that only in 19 years, short of whatever that looks like, y'all have made just that much impact. And so it just kind of goes to prove and show that you can be a transplant here and still go make that very same impact as you probably were somewhere else formerly.
Well, and I'll say this, I honor my parents from excuse me, from our time in Chicago, I've always learned up under them what it means to be compassionate, to care about your people and serving your community. And so those morals and principles, we wherever we live, we're bringing it with us. And I think that when we would be at in the Little Rock area, because they actually lived in Hot Springs, well, they still live in Hot Springs, but they would travel, to Little Rock for business and all of that. When we moved here, we saw the need for just good stuff, and we met good people. The hospitality here is totally different than Chicago. So we fell into the love of just serving, because it's easy here to serve, and so just shout out to my parents, Dr. Bax and Mr. Paul Bax, for just teaching those morals of how to serve and be compassionate and take care of your people. And another thing too is that when you have the resources, give, because it'll come back to you some way or another, and that's biblical principle, and we were raised on that. So I think that's one of the reasons why Brandon House has thrived and has had impact. And it hasn't been all good, this it's a struggle as a nonprofit, especially in today's political climate. And then specifically for the arts, funding has gotten cut all which ways, and so it hasn't been easy, doing the work that we've done. And I'm sure there's the same narrative could be for a lot of other nonprofits that's doing great work.
Yeah. I mean, the challenges are always there. And you can talk about the financial challenges, but what other challenges have you all kind of seen, kind of being in this space of nonprofit and all of that sort?
Well, I think the landscape of how to serve youth have changed. Our youth themselves have changed. Their interest and what appeals to them. I think COVID had a lot to do with it. With our students staying home for a long period of time and retraining them how to learn. Conditioning them to use more technology, that has made a great difference in how we serve, what activities we do. A lot of our community-based activities, really relied on people to come to our space. And, so when that stopped happening, we had to regroup and figure out how do we bring services to people in the community. And so we, instead of only offering after-school programs at our site, we started doing enhancement programs. We would go to schools, we would go to other after-school programs and provide arts-based programming. And so I think COVID had a lot to do with just changing, our traditional way of serving, what messages we're sending to youth around how to be involved. And then also, I think it shifted some of the responsibility back on the family, to have candid conversations with what's going on. And then the family dynamics have changed quite a bit, and so outside of just funding, I think there was a lot that Brandon House had to adjust, to make things continue to happen. But I will say this, a lot of the pivoting that Brandon House had to do is the success of that has really been because of the people that have worked, at our space, in different spaces, in different capacities. We would not be and not have stood so long if it wasn't for the talent that we had, in our organization, from artists to administrators, to people who serve in our production team. We've had some of the best, I think, in the city, that have all great reputations, and so I'm grateful to have, whether they're here still or not, I'm grateful to have served with some of the greats, in the city of Little Rock.
I mean, people don't realize that, you can name directors and have leaders and all of that stuff, but we're nothing without a team.
It's the boots on the ground, the people who are actually going out in the field, doing the work, meeting with kids, relating with people, or serving, doing rehearsals, and, just it's a lot that goes into what people see, and I've heard that people respect Brandon House for the quality of what we provide, but that takes work, and that takes vision, from people who work. And so, a lot of, I never take credit without giving credit to, my team.
Yeah, I mean, that should always be. Not only does it take work and all of those various different things, but on our end, sometimes it takes patience.
Oh, yes, for sure.
It takes being able to kind of have some of that patience to be able to know how things flow and move and all of those various different sorts. And what have you. And so that's always the thing of it. It's two ways. It's backwards and forwards, not you all do all the work and then we just kind of wait on the end product or whatever that begins to kind of look like. And so even in your programs, even with your kids, you have to have some patience with some of those things. And so y'all have adapted, y'all have adjusted, made some of those different changes. And so transition, I understand, is underway. And so what does that begin to kind of look like for Brandon House?
So after 11 years of being in service, Brandon House is dissolving in December of 2025. Both my parents are wanting, needing, desiring to retire. And,
they deserve so.
And I was going to say, they've done some great work. Even before our time in Arkansas, they both have ran, their own businesses, respectfully. And both of their businesses have been in service to the communities that we lived in. And so they're in their mid-70s, and they've worked hard all of their lives. And so because of that, I think that it's just time for it, and it is hard. Yeah. It has been hard, but it's time for Brandon House to see its end. Now preparing for that, I actually started a nonprofit called Arts Absolutely.
Okay.
To be the legacy of Brandon House. And so we hold some of the same initiatives. We wanted to keep some of the same programming happening. And so Arts Absolutely is a nonprofit organization that we're moving forward. And the mission for Arts Absolutely is to bridge the gap between cultures using the arts. And so one of my goals is to not just stay here in Little Rock, but take the talent that we have here and present it in different spaces outside of, the boundaries of our city. So we want to soar beyond city limits with the arts and showcase how the arts can be fused, how, certain unique things can actually be artistic and creative. And so that's what we're doing with Arts Absolutely.
Arts Absolutely. So one of the things that kind of struck me was you said the different cultures. Expand on that thought process of what that looks like.
So I think that the history of Brandon House have really been serving in minority communities. And when it comes to the arts, or music specifically, it has its own language. It brings different people with different backgrounds together. And so with Arts Absolutely, I want to kind of take the color off of things and engage different cultures of people so that we can understand one another a little bit better, but using the arts to do that. And so gratefully we were able to transition our Arts Over Tobacco program from Brandon House to Arts Absolutely. And that'll be one of the major and primary youth programs that we'll do to showcase different cultures of art, in different spaces, with still, advertising and promoting the healthy lifestyles, within youth. And so that's one way. And then one thing I didn't mention is I also legalized our production company, BH Productions, so that it can also be a vehicle to travel some of these art activities and engagements that we have.
Yeah, because what many of us in the nonprofit world have failed to understand, that if you don't diversify funds, if you don't have another means of being able to sustain yourself financially, you're going to fold. You're going to fall through. And so creating some of those different avenues, like you're saying, I can only imagine is going to help kind of sustain that. And so once grant opportunities come around, yes, that's great, but it's not what's sustaining you.
No. And that's one of the benefits too for having a space where we can do all of the things that we, create, as well as provide this space for other community programs or residents that, that may need a space to do their thing, to carry out their initiatives. But it is through space that we're able to generate some revenue, outside of grant funding, or contracts that we can create with organizations that may need production, services or creative services. But I think the key is we were so, I think one of the challenges that we had, going back to that question, is that we were so locked in our one location, wherever location was so important. And I think that we weren't able to see true success until we got our minds out of the box of a space or of a specific location. And so with Arts Absolutely and BH Productions, it's traveling to different spaces and offering those services outside of where we live. I think that is going to be the key, to moving us forward and sustaining us over time.
Yeah, because there's some other spaces that need what you have.
For sure.
And like saying, all of them can't come here.
That's right.
And so sometimes you have to carry it there.
Mm-hmm.
I've often said anyway that we have a cultural competency issue in this country and in this state.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about bringing in the cultures of different music and artistry and all of those various different sorts around, I can only see, at least to some degree, how that possibly helps young people, adults, and all to understand that, yeah, we operate and act differently in our respective spaces. And just because we do, don't necessarily mean you have to demean or degrade or look down upon somebody else, because they may do something just slightly different than you, but yet you find yourself to respect it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's when we talk about our youth, their views and perspectives are limited because they haven't had the opportunity to travel and go anywhere, and see beyond, their own lifestyle or their own, home life or their city. And so and with limited knowledge and education around what else is out there, you tend to have limited vision, limited goals and objectives, or at least not know what all can be transpired through just moving in different spaces, and so I think that us having opportunities or just creating, and that's one thing that I'm really big on. We don't wait for opportunities here. We create them, and so creating opportunities to go beyond some of the limits and some of the boundaries, I think will help expand the minds and the vision of our youth.
Yeah. So just really kind of continuously expanding on all of those things. There's always something that I probably didn't ask. What's something that I didn't ask that you want to be able to kind of share about?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I think I covered the the bittersweetness of us dissolving in December, us having the legacy organization to move forward. BH Productions, is open and available to people who need production services. And I also just a big thank you, to the community for receiving us, and allowing us to have impact, regardless of what name is on the organization or where we're at. My heart is to serve. It's always been that, and I've always had love and empathy for creatives, because it's hard out here, for a creative, especially if you're destined and purpose to share your gift. Most of the time they're having to juggle between, family life. A lot of their work happens in social settings, so they have to juggle, having, that maturity to do work in places that are fun, so to speak. And so I have a heart just for people who are destined to share their gift, that are aware of their purpose in life, and may need some direction, some help, some support. That's how I've always positioned my service, in the work is helping those individuals. And so everybody that I have been able to serve in that capacity, I'm grateful for, because it's through them that I'm able to do what I'm supposed to do, and so a big thank you, to Arkansas and to Little Rock, for allowing me to do what I'm supposed to do in life, for receiving my family, because we are not from here, and great success to the students that have graduated out of the Brandon House program, and and the places that have just undergirded us. Big shout out to Ms. Bell. She's always been a great support with BCD. A lot of the other community-based programs that have gotten funding through the city of Little Rock, we're like a family, because we've all struggled, through the same kind of challenges. And so, it's been a eye-opening experience to run a nonprofit, but it's also been a great deal of just gratitude, to be able to have that kind of impact, in a city that you're not from, and I think that makes a big difference too.
So two last things. I'll just kind of ask you to wrap up with how people connect to all of those different things. But from where I sit, I'm not a creative. But sometimes creatives get looked down upon because they seem to be different. Some of them. And so give that encouragement word to both the creative and those of us that are not, of how we should make sure to always find ourselves to be in that respective place, to respect the gift, to respect what it is they find themselves to bring.
Well, I will say that creatives are supposed to be different, that we were designed to be different. And if you think about all of the major life experiences that happens, through birth, death, graduations, celebrations, everything that is monumental that happens in our lives, what do we do around it? We sing, we eat, we praise, there's some artistic element that allows us to go through it. And COVID, that was a big eye opener, because when that happened, people were in the house. We were locked down, and so they had no choice but to, find ways to be entertained, find ways to connect with each other, tap into their gifts and their spirits. Find ways to showcase what they do, without the pressures and, the resources or expectation to pay for a lot of things, because nothing was, in motion. And so I think that we have to honor those creatives, because they carry us through major moments in life, major traumas, and so that's what I would say to creatives: be unique, be yourself. And appreciate your gifts, understand it is connected to your purpose. And then for those who, may not understand that uniqueness, I would just encourage them to look back into very important parts of their life and see what elements, you use to celebrate that. And I guarantee you there's some artistic or creative, element that's within that.
How do we connect?
So you can find us on all of our social medias at bhproductionslr.com or BH Pro Squad. And Arts Absolutely also is building its presence on the social media platforms, and you'll find us through Arts Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Bax. And thank you to the Bax family, honestly, for coming here, for being a part of Arkansas, Little Rock, and the community as a whole. This has been another episode of Get Connected AR. We pray that you're really enjoying these episodes, and we'll see you next time.